The autumn rain tapped gently against the kitchen window as David Morgan stirred his coffee, watching his children prepare for school. Emma, 12, meticulously organized her backpack while 10-year-old Ethan wolfed down his cereal with characteristic enthusiasm. 3 years had passed since cancer took their mother, and the three of them had gradually formed a new normal imperfect, but filled with love. "Dad, can you sign my permission slip?" Emma placed a slightly crumpled paper before him. "It's for the art museum trip next Friday." David smiled, signing with a flourish. "Your mom would have loved that. She always said you had her eye for beauty." A shadow of sadness crossed Emma's face before brightening again. These moments happened less frequently now, but they still came brief remembrances of what they lost. "We're going to be late," Ethan announced, milk dribbling down his chin. David checked his watch, 7:45. "Right as always, timekeeper. Grab your jackets." The morning drop-off routine completed, David headed to his architectural firm downtown. At 38, he'd built a respectable career designing commercial spaces, though lately he'd taken on fewer projects to ensure he was home for dinner each night. His assistant greeted him with messages and the day's schedule. "Parent-teacher conferences are today," she reminded him. "You're leaving at 3. David nodded gratefully. Before Lisa's death, he'd missed too many school events. Now he made them priorities. The conferences proceeded smoothly. Emma excelled academically, though her teachers noted she could be withdrawn. Ethan struggled with focus, but showed remarkable aptitude for science and mathematics. As David exited Ethan's classroom, he collided with a woman carrying a stack of folders. "I'm so sorry," he apologized, helping gather scattered papers. "Entirely my fault," she replied with a warm laugh. "I was reading while walking a dangerous habit." She was striking not in a conventional way, but something about her intelligent eyes and confident posture caught David's attention. Her name badge read, Sarah Bennett, School Counselor. "You're Emma and Ethan's father," she observed. "I've been meaning to introduce myself. I'm new this semester." "David Morgan," he offered his hand. "Have my troublemakers been keeping you busy?" Sarah smiled. "Quite the opposite. They're remarkable children, especially considering what they've been through. Emma's been helping with our peer mentoring program." They chatted briefly about the children before Sarah suggested coffee sometime to discuss Emma's potential involvement in a new arts therapy initiative. David surprised himself by accepting immediately. That coffee meeting extended into dinner, and dinner led to more meetings. Sarah was 34, never married, passionate about child development, and surprisingly easy to talk to. For the first time since becoming a widower, David felt the stirrings of something beyond grief and responsibility. He approached introducing Sarah to his children with caution, arranging a casual lunch at their favorite pizza place. Emma was reserved but polite. Ethan immediately peppered Sarah with questions about everything from her favorite superhero to whether she believed in aliens. By the end of the meal, he declared her pretty cool for a grown-up. Over the following months, Sarah became a fixture in their lives. She helped Emma with school projects, cheered at Ethan's soccer games, and brought a lightness to their home that had been missing. 6 months into their relationship, during a weekend at the coast, David proposed. Sarah's tearful yes felt like the beginning of a second chance at happiness. "We're not trying to replace your mom," David explained to the children that evening. "No one could ever do that. But Sarah makes me happy, and I think she could make our family even better." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "I like Sarah. She's different from Mom, but that's okay." Ethan was more direct. "Does this mean Sarah will live with us? Can she make those chocolate chip pancakes more often?" The engagement announcement was met with congratulations from friends and colleagues. They planned a small summer wedding, giving everyone time to adjust to the idea of their changing family. The first hint of trouble came during discussions about living arrangements. Their 3-bedroom home felt suddenly inadequate when Sarah mentioned her brother might need a place to stay. "Jake's going through a rough patch," she explained one evening after the children were asleep. "Lost his job in Chicago and his apartment soon after." "That's tough," David sympathized. "How long would he need to stay?" Sarah shrugged. "A few months? Until he finds his feet? He's brilliant, but has trouble maintaining momentum." David hesitated. "We don't have much extra space. My office could work temporarily, I suppose." You're wonderful, Sarah kissed him. Family helps family, right? That's what I love about you, your big heart. Jake arrived the following week, a lanky 32-year-old with Sarah's eyes but none of her warmth. He spent most days watching television or sleeping, emerging mainly for meals. The children were clearly uncomfortable around him, especially when he made offhand comments about the noise level when they played. He's just adjusting, Sarah defended when David expressed concern. Jake's not used to children. David tried to be understanding, but when items began disappearing, small amounts of cash, a pair of cufflinks that had belonged to his father, his patience thinned. I'm not accusing anyone, he said carefully during a private moment with Sarah, but things have gone missing since Jake arrived. Sarah's expression hardened. Are you implying my brother is stealing from you? I'm saying something doesn't feel right. He's family, David. We support family through difficult times. The argument ended unresolved, leaving a tension that hadn't existed before. David noticed Sarah becoming increasingly critical of the children's activities, suggesting Emma's art classes were indulgences, and Ethan spent too much time on sports rather than academics. 3 weeks after Jake's arrival, Sarah broached a new subject during dinner preparation. I've been researching schools, she said casually, chopping vegetables. There's an excellent boarding academy in Vermont with strong arts and science programs. David paused. Boarding school? For whose children? For Emma and Ethan, of course. It would give them structure, excellent education, and frankly, she lowered her voice, some space for us to start our marriage, right? My children aren't going to boarding school, David said firmly. They've already lost their mother. I won't send them away. They'd come home for holidays, Sarah countered. Many successful people attended boarding schools, and it would solve our space issue. Jake could use their rooms until he finds a place. David stared at her, suddenly seeing something he'd missed before. This isn't about education opportunities. This is about making room for your brother. It's about building our life together, Sarah insisted. Don't you want us to have a fresh start? Not at the expense of my children's stability. The argument escalated, ending with Sarah's ultimatum. Either the children go to boarding school or the wedding is off. I deserve to be a priority in your life, David. That night, lying awake, David replayed every moment of their relationship, searching for signs he might have missed. By morning, his path was clear. I've made my decision, he told Sarah over breakfast, the children already off to school. My children stay with me. They're not negotiable. Sarah's expression hardened. Then I guess we're done. I deserve better than being second place. And my children deserve a father who puts them first, he replied quietly. She packed her belongings that afternoon, though Jake, surprisingly, made no move to leave. I need a few more days, he insisted. Finding an apartment takes time. David reluctantly agreed to 1 week, uncomfortable but unwilling to force the issue immediately. The fallout was swift and unexpected. Sarah began telling mutual friends that David had been controlling and unwilling to compromise. Several colleagues became distant, and even the children's former babysitter canceled abruptly, citing loyalty to Sarah. Jake grew increasingly hostile, making veiled threats about making David pay for hurting his sister. When David finally insisted he leave after finding him going through his home office drawers, Jake damaged several pieces of furniture on his way out. The children, however, seemed relieved. I didn't want to go away to school, Ethan confessed that evening. I was scared to tell you. You can always tell me anything, David assured them both. We're a team, remember? Emma, who had been quiet throughout the ordeal, finally spoke. Sarah was nice sometimes, but she didn't look at us the same way when you weren't around. She told me once that children need to earn their place in a family. David pulled them both into a hug, heart aching at what they had endured silently. 3 weeks later, Sarah appeared at David's door, her composed facade cracked. She looked exhausted and frightened. Jake stole thousands from my bank account and disappeared, she admitted. I need help, David. Please. For a moment, David felt a flicker of their old connection, the desire to protect her. Then he remembered her ultimatum, her willingness to separate him from his children. I'm sorry this happened to you, he said gently but firmly, but our relationship is over. I suggest you contact the police about Jake." As he closed the door, David felt no triumph, only sadness for what might have been and gratitude for what he'd preserved. That evening, David sat with Emma and Ethan on their porch swing, watching the sunset. "Are you sad about Sarah, Dad?" Emma asked, leaning against his shoulder. "A little," he admitted, "but I made the right choice." "Us?" Ethan looked up. "Always you," David confirmed, pulling them close. "Some people come into our lives to stay, others just pass through. The trick is knowing the difference." As darkness fell, the three Morgans went inside their home, smaller by 2 people, but somehow more complete than it had been in months. David knew there would be other challenges ahead, perhaps even other relationships, but he had learned a valuable lesson about boundaries, priorities, and the unbreakable bond of family. In the quiet of that evening, as he tucked his children into bed, David realized that sometimes the most important choices in life aren't about what we gain, but what we refuse to lose. 6 months later, David stood in the gallery, surrounded by Emma's classmates and their parents. The school art show had transformed the gymnasium into a showcase of creativity, but he couldn't take his eyes off Emma's painting a portrait of their family, just the 3 of them, standing together against a backdrop of swirling colors. "It's called Unbreakable," Emma explained shyly when her art teacher praised the work. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," David said, his throat tight with emotion. Later that week, during Ethan's science fair, David noticed a woman watching his son's presentation on renewable energy with genuine interest. She asked thoughtful questions and laughed at Ethan's jokes. "My mom's an environmental engineer," she explained to Ethan. "She'd love your project." She turned to David with a smile. "I'm Claire Wilson, by the way. My daughter Zoe is in Ethan's class." "David Morgan," he replied, noticing her wedding ring was absent, but a faint tan line suggested it was a recent development. Their conversation was interrupted by the judge's arrival, but before they parted, Claire mentioned a community cleanup at the local park that weekend. "Zoe and I are volunteering. It might be something Ethan would enjoy, given his interest in environmental science." David found himself accepting the invitation, not because he felt any immediate attraction, but because it seemed like something his children would enjoy. This time, he would proceed with caution, watching carefully how any new person interacted with Emma and Ethan when they thought no one was looking. The park cleanup led to a group pizza lunch, which eventually led to occasional family outings, hiking, museum visits, and community events. Claire was divorced with full custody of her daughter, and she understood instinctively the boundaries and priorities of single parenthood. "I like Claire," Emma commented after several months of these casual gatherings. "She actually listens when I talk." "And she knows tons about rockets," Ethan added enthusiastically. David smiled. "I like her too." He was in no rush to define their relationship or make grand plans. The lesson from Sarah remained fresh. Some people viewed children as obstacles to overcome rather than people to cherish. This time, he would ensure any potential partner saw his children clearly and valued them accordingly. One evening, as they walked behind their children at the county fair, Claire gently took his hand. "They're extraordinary kids," she said, watching Emma help Zoe win a carnival game. "You've done an amazing job raising them." "They make it easy," David replied, though they both knew that wasn't entirely true. Parenting was never easy, especially after loss. "Nothing about this is easy," Claire corrected him with a knowing smile, "but it's worth doing right." In that moment, David felt something settle in his chest, not the whirlwind excitement he'd experienced with Sarah, but something steadier and more grounded. A recognition, perhaps, that sometimes the right people come into your life not to change it dramatically, but to walk alongside you on the path you've already chosen. Whether this connection with Claire would grow into something more remained to be seen, but David had learned to trust his instincts and, more importantly, to prioritize the 2 people who mattered most. Emma and Ethan deserved nothing less than a father who would always choose them first. As they rejoined the children, their laughter blending in the summer twilight, David felt grateful for the choice he'd made and the wisdom he'd gained. Some lessons came at a high price, but their value was immeasurable. The family they had built might not look like the one he had once imagined, but it was strong, resilient, and, as Emma's painting had declared, unbreakable.